welcome to the Filofox podcast with me, Rebecca, your personal organiser and declutter coach. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Filofox podcast. You'll hear a little bit of thumping in the background, so apologies for that. I am out for a walk today. If you're listening a few months, a couple of years down the line, it's March 2020, and it would be remiss of me not to mention that as of last night, it's the 23rd today, as of last night, we were told that we were in, I would say, almost full lockdown due to the coronavirus. And what I mean by that is that we are still allowed to go for one walk a day and to go for essential shopping only. And this is to try and get the curve down of the spread of the virus. Now, a couple of weeks ago, before this really came into fruition, I recorded a podcast with the composer of my music, Beccy Owen, who also is a client of mine, and I've helped her declutter. One of the things that Beccy wanted to talk about, and we thought would be a good idea at that time, was overwhelm. And actually, considering everything that's going on right now, it's probably very apt. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed in normal circumstances. But I think over the next 3, 4, 5 months, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get clarity. And probably on next couple of podcasts, I'll give you some tools to help you do that. But for now, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to the interview with Beccy Owen. Today we have Beccy Owen here in the room, and we're going to be talking about overwhelm and the process of actually getting a declutter person in and having that realisation. I always say that the hardest step is actually calling somebody in, and then after that, you just make lots of decisions. But that's the biggest and hardest step. And once you've done that, once you've allowed somebody into your home and you've made that decision, I think you're already halfway there. So welcome, Beccy, to the Filofox podcast.
Thanks. It's lovely to be here.
Let's talk about that realisation that you're in overwhelm and the decision to call me in and how you came to that decision.
I find it really hard to ask for help. And I think I'd needed help for ages. My house was starting to spiral. I work from home. I'm a musician and run my own business. And so I had this feeling that everything was starting to just get out of my control completely. I couldn't find anything. At the time I lived with my husband, now recently divorced. And I think part of calling you was about generally just kind of crying for help, because my life was feeling very disordered in all kinds of ways. And I've always been very sensitive to environment. People have told me in the past that's a Celtic trait. I'm not sure if the Welsh thing is a thing, but I remember trying to learn maths at school in a temporary classroom in year 7, and it was so cold and it was really grey and uninspiring, and I couldn't focus in there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it turns out I'm dyscalculic anyway, but it didn't help. And I took that feeling forward into life and recognised that actually being in an environment where things are light and clean and ordered had a massive impact on how I functioned. And I was in the opposite situation in my house at the time I rang you. There was just, it wasn't dirty or anything. It was just that it was completely disorganised. And I was really finding that having a massive impact on my ability to do my work and to be happy at home. I didn't want to go home because I remember the feeling of just how many jobs there were to do and I didn't know where to start. So I remember ringing you, and I remember I was really, really emotional, and it was a kind of like real cry for help. I was kind of at rock bottom in terms of both my management of the house, but also in terms of my relationship. And I had a really strong sense that if I could have some kind of declutter of the space, that would leave me with some mental clarity and emotional clarity around all kinds of other things.
Yeah, I think clarity is really important, and we talk about when we declutter our environment, we're creating space for things that mean something to us. We're letting go of things that no longer serve us in a way that either we haven't looked at them for many, many years, or we have duplicates because we're in overwhelm. We can duplicate what we own, and it might be just 5 potato peelers or 10 wooden spoons, or something, or a pair of scissors. Scissors seem to go missing, and teaspoons, they're a very common thing that we duplicate. And I think when we have clarity, we also have space for creativity, which is really important for you, isn't it? Especially important for you in a creative industry.
Yeah, I think we started with the music room, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Oh, no, we started with the kitchen because that was something that I could do with my husband at the time, and it felt really important to have him on board. Mm-hmm. So we started with the kitchen, which was great because it was our shared space, and we had a lot of time in community in the kitchen with friends. And then the next priority was the music room. And I remember the feeling after we'd done the music room of lightness in my spirit. And I hadn't been able to do any songwriting in that room for about 2 years. And within about a week of that declutter session, I was in that room writing. So it had, immediate impact in that sense. And I did feel like I could be creative in there, and, there was space to move physically and creatively. So it did really help. And I think that had a knock-on effect because I began to very quickly see the possibilities. So I think one of the things that was great about working with you was I'd lost some hope. I was someone that had previously, read Marie Kondo's book. I'd got it when I was in San Francisco years before the kind of movement began. Mm. And I remember evangelizing and doing that process, and it helped lots. And I let go of the stuff that didn't serve me, as you said, when I was living on my own in Yorkshire. And then when I got into a cohabiting situation, it was very difficult to kind of cultivate that methodology for both of us. I think when there's only one of you pulling in that direction, it's really tricky.
Yeah, I think people forget when you call in a declutter coach, it is about accommodating the dynamics of the whole family. And I think when we have a shared space, we've all come from different conditioning, different ways of living. And in any relationship, it's always about compromise. And the person that calls you in, it's always really difficult for the other person, but quite common thing I've found with husband and wife is that the husband's almost a little bit embarrassed, a little bit shy about calling a declutter coach in. But once we've had a chat and they start to see the movement within the house and how much happier their partner, wife, are, it has like that knock-on effect. And you think, oh, well, maybe there's something in this. And with families, it also is the effect that children are going to be learning those behaviours as well. Anybody that's coming into the home, even in the stepchildren situations that I've got as well, they see how you live and it can have an effect on them. I've noticed that some people are hoarders, that their children will become minimalists, and it has the opposite effect, or they learn the same behaviours and then they take it on to other relationships. I think it is about past relationships and the way that you've been brought up as well. Do you think that's been an impact on your sort of dynamics within every home that you've shared, and about being able to compromise with everybody that you've shared space with?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've got a twin brother and we always had separate rooms. So I was quite independent in my space from as being a child. And I think that in me has bred a little bit of intolerance about other people's styles. Like I never actually had to share a room. I had to share a house, obviously, but I think my family all had a similar sense of what was acceptable, timeline-wise. So, for example, we were very clean as a family, but we weren't particularly tidy until we had to be. And then it was like, right, okay, gang, we need to sort this out. And I think my mum managed the space in secret, silent ways that I didn't appreciate until later in life. And what that meant for me in terms of cohabiting with partners is that I became the secret, silent worker, and that unspoken labour that we do often as women. And that really did my head in. And so one of the things that getting you in helped was to make that really transparent for all of us. It was no longer an under the radar thing. It was no longer a thing that I was, searing with resentment over. We were having a discussion about it with someone that was a mediator without the usual passive aggression. And that was really helpful. And I think for me, what you coming into the space and helping us look at it properly did, it really shone a light on our values and how they differed. Like, I have to say that it was a big part of what led me to be able to see that this marriage isn't working. And it isn't just about the washing up, of course, but it's interesting, isn't it, that it was the washing up that broke us. Because it was just really clear. It was about commitment, and it was about work ethic, and it was about what people are and aren't willing to give and what matters and doesn't. And I think for me, it matters that my space is clear and clean and cared for. And it's absolutely fine, by the way, that it doesn't matter to somebody else, but I can't share a space with that person anymore. And so it really helped me get lots of clarity on all kinds of things. And the dynamic that, you arrived into was really dysfunctional and had a lot of resentment in it between me and my husband. And loads of that was about the house for me. So when the decluttering started to happen, I remember just feeling this shift in myself, and I grew in confidence, and I grew in the ability to articulate what it was I really needed. And when it was clear that I wasn't going to get what I needed, I was able to move forward.
And I think that's a key point there, is actually gaining that clarity and that self-awareness that you have, and also have that reaffirmed that you need that space to be you, but you also need that space to be a place that you want to come home to. And I often talk about the investment that we put into our homes. If we think of the monetary value and how much a percentage of our income is taken over by council tax, rent, mortgages, utilities, everything that makes a house function. If you're dreading coming home to that space and it's no longer your sanctuary, there are questions that need to be asked to say, well, how do I make this my sanctuary? But what I found working with you, Beccy, was that you were ready. And I think that's really important. And you can call a declutter coach in, but if you're not ready, it's not going to make a difference, and your habits aren't going to change. It's just going to be a tidy up. And that's not what decluttering is. It's actually about making that home the way you want it to be, so that you actually look forward to coming home.
Yeah, and I do now. I live there on my own now, and it's just a different place. The energy is completely different. Partly, obviously, because a whole being has moved out that carried his own energy, and I think I was really ready for all kinds of change when you came in. And I didn't quite know where to start. I think that was a big part of the overwhelm, when you look around and there's just so much stuff and so many things to do. And what you came in and helped with was, firstly, not being judgmental. So the shame that was attached to that space and all that clutter and all that rubbish, it started to disappear, because it became a task. It was like, oh, we can do this. There's a method this person can bring, and there's a kind of intuition that you have, which is so honed and so specific. So I had the real sense that what we did together was specific to the space and what I needed, which was great. And it went, we've gone at the pace that I've needed to go at, and there's obviously other layers to it that we could still go back in and look at. But what it helped do was build momentum for me. So from that point of calling you and asking for help, straight away I remember thinking, oh, thank goodness. And the relief created energy in me. So I remember thinking, if this is how it can be, if this is how a room can look and feel, I want this for the rest of the house. So it became about committing to the possibility, and it's had a massive impact. For example, the fact that my knickers and socks continue to be folded and in such a lovely, like, it's created this different routine at the start of my day. My ritual is different. I make my bed every day now, and I didn't before, because I want my space to live up to the state of my socks. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to let my little socks down. Look at them, they're all folded, they're beautiful. And so there's this different standard in me now, which is still emerging and still coming. And don't get me wrong, like, I have not turned into Monica from Friends. I'm not that guy. But I see things that I didn't see before. And for example, I was walking down my stairs earlier today and I was thinking, right, later on, I'm going to come back after recording this podcast with Rebecca and I'm going to clean these stairs because I cannot remember the last time. And now that the sun's out and the spring is coming, we see these things, and I don't want to walk past that coffee stain anymore. No. I don't want to feel anything other than neutral about those stairs.
And I think what you just said there about the socks, we joke about it and we laugh about going through your knicker drawer and things like that. You know that you're in, you've called in a declutter coach to literally go through your drawers, but it's quite symbolic in the fact that when we buy something, and I'll talk about this later on in a podcast about intentional purchasing and having care for what we have, including a pair of socks. And it's treating everything with care, so that folding, like you say, becomes a process, but actually becomes a point. I think it's not just about folding the socks and them looking pretty, it's that process of caring for those items, feeling the material. And it might sound a bit woo-woo, in that, but you actually, I don't know about you, but I can fold as quickly as I can roll a pair of socks. But folding gives me much more pleasure, and the end product is a whole ball of socks where you're looking for a particular pair, whereas if you see them filed and they all look pretty, you say, oh, there they are, just pull those out. And it's the same with jeans. You can file your jeans, and we'll laugh about that again, but if they're on a shelf and they're folded into a certain way that you put them in where they're actually vertical rather than horizontal, you're not pulling from underneath, you're actually pulling from a file almost, and it gives you pleasure to see every single pair of trousers. And it is that symbolic nature of it that we really, really care for everything that we keep.
I think the mindfulness aspect is really clear for me. I mean, I'm a meditator, and I'm someone that has invested a lot in that idea of mindfulness over the years. And I've discovered through various expressions of things that make me uncomfortable and things that scare me, or things that hijack my system, as someone that lives with bipolar disorder and that has had eating disorders on and off, that a huge part of what creates chaos for me is a fear of scarcity. And the disorder comes from a place of fear, basically. And one thing that happens when I'm decluttering with you or I'm decluttering on my own is that I start to feel this sense of abundance. I have so many pairs of socks, dude. I don't need all those socks. I have enough socks. In fact, I have enough of everything and then some. So that fear of scarcity pipes down, which again creates more space in my spirit and mind.
Absolutely. I think from parents my parents are post-war, and there was a lot of scarcity, and they were brought up in a time when it was good to buy a house, have your children, then buy another house, and have everything look like you were abundant, in a materialistic way, and very careful with everything, but also very fearful of everything, as well as that care was fear of losing that. And I think I myself, who've gone through this process over the years as well, have realised that we have enough and some, and we're still going through those layers which you mentioned before, because I think when you do that first initial layer I always say go back, because when you've gone through the process once, if you go back, you'll actually be more assertive with what you part with.
Yeah, for sure. I've just dropped a load of bags off at the charity shop on the way over here. And there's things in those bags which I've been holding on to, and I've had to really look at and turn around and realise, no, I don't need you. Someone else would really love you, but I don't even look at you anymore. I'm just holding on for the sake of holding on. And I think we do that a lot with all kinds of things. And so this is emotional work. It's practical, it's logical, it's methodical, but there's a huge emotional aspect to it as well. And in that sense, it's been pretty transformatory for me, actually. And I feel like as I downsize, my sense of stability and security increases. Because I rent and I have a place at the moment that is a little bit beyond my means. And I like the feeling that in a couple of months' time, as I keep going through those different levels and layers and keep getting rid of things I don't need and that don't serve me anymore, I could move anywhere. I could be in a much smaller place and still be very comfortable and still create a lovely and loving environment for myself.
And I think that's a really good place to finish on, because I think you're right. It is about recognising your own space. I do talk about quantifiable, that clutter or minimalism, neither are quantifiable, and it's what's comfortable for you. But going through those layers, and I think a lot of minimalists say this, is that the less they have, the more abundant they feel, the less overwhelmed they feel, and the fear almost disappears.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Beccy, for giving us a little bit of insight of working with a declutter coach, me. And I really appreciate you coming today to talk about it and being so open as well. It's a very commendable thing, and I think us being more open, particularly when things are overwhelming, and the impact it does have on mental health, and how overwhelmed, reducing that does give you clarity and does allow you to move forwards creatively, which is really important to everybody, and not just those who are in the creative industries, but I think we all need clarity. And so I really appreciate you coming today.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you, because you've given me so much, and I'm still learning loads, even when you're not there. And you've been so gentle with me and so clear. And thank you for doing this podcast, because I think it's going to help lots of other people as well. So well done you.
Well, I hope you really enjoyed that. I did. It was a great chatting with Beccy, and a very insightful and articulated so well how she was feeling and what benefits she gained from decluttering her home and what it gave her in the long term. As I said in my intro, these are uncertain times at the time of recording these podcasts, and I want to help you gain clarity, reduce overwhelm, get decluttering, get tidied, and make your home a place of sanctuary, help you have a great workspace, all of those things over the next few weeks. So take care, and I'll see you again soon.